Hello, and welcome to Beyond Hegemony. My name is Trina Casey, and I am joined with my amazing co-hosts Sahana and Garry, and our special guest Gwyneth Jones. Hey, you guys! So Gwyneth has a very interesting background in that she is working with the planet or trying to support. Oh, where'd you go? Trying to support the planet in as far as a would you say nature coach or along those
Oh,
lines?
yeah, I have a lot of things I call myself. It's tricky
Okay,
to encapsulate it.
multifaceted.
But yeah, I mean, I do nature-based coaching as one of the many things. Yeah, I mean, it's really about trying to, reawaken people to the fact that we are nature. So I don't even like saying our connection with nature. But
Okay,
yeah,
I
that's
do.
that's one of the things.
Well, we're all multifaceted beings, and we're more than one thing. We don't have to be boxed in, as hegemony loves to do to us all. So, anyways, so Shahana and Gwyneth have kind of like a connection on as far as where they're both kind of like directed and intersectionality. So I'm going to hand it over to Shahana.
Hi, I'm so glad to be back with you, with everyone. And hi, Gwyneth. I have been thinking of this question ever since I found out that you are a work that reconnects a facilitator. Joanna Macy's work, everything, is very, very close to my heart. And I believe that her work is today, especially, is incredibly important at this juncture of our civilizational trajectory or path, or whichever way we put it. Years back, she spoke about the Great Turning. Years back. And we are in the midst of it. We can literally see it, sense it, feel it, and we are completely embroiled in it. So I would love to have you speak to that through the lenses of your work that reconnects work, your facilitation, and how WTR, how not only is it important, but how it can really help and hold this space for what I call it a space of not only liminality but a space that is kind of that's a space between collapse and creation at the same time. So something is ending, something is collapsing, and out of that something is being created. And how does WTR create that, build that bridge that helps us to hold grief while also holding and looking forward to the abundance that the planet also has to offer. So could you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, I can definitely try. So, for people who don't know, the work that reconnects is a body of work mainly created by, well, brought together, I would say, by Joanna Macy, who started the work in the 1970s. And yeah, you can see a lot of what she talked about coming more and more true because one of the theoretical underpinnings of the work is that there are, simultaneously three stories that we're seeing playing out. One of them is business as usual, so the hegemony story, really, and a lot of people are still kind of living in that, right? They're still seeing the world through that lens. But another lens or story is that of the great unraveling. So that's the story we see when we see collapse, when we look at things that look apocalyptic, and we look at the climate crisis, and we look at escalating war and fascism, and all of these things are signs of the great unraveling. But she also talks about this third story, which is the great turning, and that's the story really of people who decide that there is actually a different way to do things and who turn toward the suffering. That's part of it, to not block out the pain and the negativity anymore, but to turn towards the suffering, to allow all of that into your heart to ripen and compost, as she puts it, and then to start to work together to create something better. So one of the things that you could say is a sign of the great turning is more and more and more people waking up to what's happening in the world. This podcast, more and more awareness of inequality, like all of those things, as well as frontline work, as well as I don't know, I'm in tons of work here in North Wales that's all like small scale community climate action. All of those things are also part of the great turning. But it's important to say that that's all three stories are happening simultaneously, and we can kind of live all three of those stories in the same day, in the same minute. We can kind of flip between those lenses. So then it offers some comfort and solace in that way, that we can actually say, hey, there's a different way to see what's happening right now as a kind of great awakening or great turning. But at the same time, Joanna Macy herself has said, we don't know right now whether we are death doulas for a dying world or midwives for a new world. We can't know that it's all going to be great and turn out wonderfully. She kind of says this could be it. And either way, the task is the same, to show up as our fullest selves with love and compassion and presence. I don't know. It's an amazing body of work, and there's so much to say about it. But one other thing I'd say that's really huge is, part of the spiral of the work. So you go through a spiral, kind of 4 stages when you're in a workshop. One of those parts is honoring our pain for the world. So there's a lot there about, what happens when we block that pain, when we ignore it, distract ourselves, numb ourselves. And one of the quotes that I love from her is, you might think that if you let all the pain in that your heart would break, but they say, in fact, the heart that breaks open can contain the whole universe.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So it's like really about, it's very spiritual stuff, but I feel like she's sort of taken the best bits from a lot of different belief systems, but at the same time it's a very open source kind of work, so she's tried to do it in not in a hegemonic way. She's not trying to claim any copyright for it. That's another thing that is really great about it. But expanding our ability to be with pain and discomfort, right? So it's really kind of growing the emotional intelligence as well, to link back to Trina and my way that we met. EQ. And well, I'll just say that for now, because I feel like
well, that was a lot. That was beautiful. That was so, like, it encompassed so much of what we need right now, right? Gosh, I don't really know her work, so now somebody put that in the chat, because I'm going to do some further research on her, because that is,
I'll send you stuff.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love that. So what are we getting from this, you guys? I got goosebumps at some point, because my work is all about going in and not in examining your emotions. And this, by the way, I wanted to point this out before we go any further. We are on the pillar. We're working on pillars now. So we're on the pillar of environment and climate. And I thought Gwen, with her work, was perfect for this, because that's kind of how we met. We were talking about that aspect of you doing these workshops and going out in nature, and the reconnection of our inner self with ourselves. Because I love that you said that we're not separate from nature. We are nature. So how's everybody feeling right now after all that?
Amazing. And what also came up, when you said, about the 3 stories existing, or rather coexisting at the same time. It's all here, all now. So we have the story of collapse, we have the story of business as usual collapse, and also the stories of what is coming, the emergent future, all coexisting in the present. What that also made me think a little, of course, of the Three Horizons framework, which is kind of says the same thing, but for in a very organization centric way, but also that we need different leaders, or rather different kinds of leadership qualities that can hold space for collapse and grief, that can also prepare the soil for the future to emerge and build future, the quote unquote capacities to hold grief and create. And that also are vision holders, what I call, like literally entrepreneurs of hope, who can also weave all of these together. So the current leadership qualities that we currently have inherited from the 500 years of hegemony have created generations of socially, uh, I would say, socially disconnected individuals who are disconnected from not only society, but from their own selves and from nature, completely disconnected entities who think aggression and assertiveness is leadership. So we have power brokers and not leaders. So how can all of this be woven together to build leadership capacities the world desperately needs? I mean, today when we see the choices and the decisions being made, we can only groan and literally, bang. I don't even know what to do when I hear all the vetoes at the UN. And I mean, what are the so-called leaders even thinking about? If are they
Themselves.
even thinking?
No.
Are uh, do they have any gray cells left? I mean, it's incredible, right? So how do we build those leadership capacities? And Joanna Macy at one point calls them, I think, the Shambhala warriors who will appear in the corridors of power, right? Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
how do we build that?
Ooh. I don't know. But yeah, I imagine, the other kind of big thing that I have studied is yeah, this emotional intelligence, emotional maturity. But I think it goes beyond that, really, right? It's more maybe spiritual maturity, but that's harder to say in a world where even the word spiritual has been co-opted and watered down and yeah, turned
And
into
commodified
this
and
Oh
whole
yeah,
other
oh
yeah.
yeah.
is there such word as what's it, patriarchized?
Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah,
so.
and sort of a magnet for narcissists. There's a lot of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that's that's what's so difficult now, isn't it? Is that to become a leader, you have to make your way through this kind of a lot of barriers because the people who already have power don't have that emotional
Yeah.
maturity and compassion and kindness, or yeah, understanding that we're all connected. And so you have to almost become like that to
Yeah.
gain any sort of leadership position.
Yeah.
I mean, small scale community leadership, maybe that's somewhere we can start, because I'm also working in the third sector now here, and a lot of very small kind of grassroots things. Groups with even 10 people have issues with leadership. I see there's still work to be done, just within communities on being able to, yeah, I don't know, hold space for others. And I think that starts from being able to have a good relationship with yourself, right? With your own body, with your
Number
own.
one. Number one.
Yeah.
Gary, what's resonating in you right now after hearing all this stuff?
There's so much. I guess I just love this point around a magnet for narcissism, Gwyneth. What an incredibly potent phrase, though. It's a really helpful lens to sort of explore. So that's really powerful. And power brokers, Sahana, like, so there's so much already, Trina. But there's something I wrote down on my pad, which is this:
Mm.
portal dancers. So I believe that actually what we're pointing towards are those people that can handle paradox, people that can actually look at those three horizons that we're discussing and say, no one is more or less important in this moment. We need to embrace all of it. And how do we do that? We can't do it just above the neck, right? Like, we can't think our way to these new worlds that we're trying to imagine, right? It's a whole body. And I think I'll wrap up my sort of reflection here with a practical example of what I'm seeing even within the chemicals industry, one of the worst, most toxic sectors on the planet that needs to change very, very quickly or die. I have seen this shift that Gwyneth's pointing to in my line manager. When we go for walks and talks for 3 hours in nature, and we're not sitting in a square box staring at screens, the innovation, the creativity, the expansion of possibility that happens in that wide nature-based space, it is not 10x, it's not 100x, it is infinite. Because I see it in his body, I see it in the conversation, I see it in the weight of the mask and the fear and the hegemony that just dissolves around him as soon as he's outside of the office and we're just being human together. So I just wanted to give a real life application that at the singular individual level is where transformation can happen as much as we need it to happen systemically. So they're just a few thoughts that are coming through and around me in this moment, Trina, Gwyneth, and Sahana. Yeah. Thank you.
That's beautiful. But it's so important. And that's why I work the way that I do with my clients, because if we're not doing that mind, body, spirit alignment, we're missing something. We're missing something. It can't, and it is paradoxical, because basically we've been taught for generations after generations to only focus on one part and disconnect from the rest. But it's impossible to do these shifts that are necessary without those alignments, without going into that darkness, as Gwyneth talked about, and say, wow, this really sucks. This hurts. I want to run away from this. I literally had a client recently, just for example, she's doing so well. And then I've been trying to get underneath the trauma, the childhood trauma, gradually. And she just came out of the blue and says, I think I'm ready to tackle my childhood now. And I said, oh, wonderful. I've been waiting for you, because I want you to be ready. And then she canceled the day. And I said, it's going to be okay. And she just said, I don't know how to do this because it's so scary. And they've made it scary. Hegemony has made tapping into all of the emotions terrifying.
Yeah.
And so it's about reprogramming our understanding of emotions and what they are, and sort of just completely rebranding the ideology around it. And that takes a spiritual component.
Yeah.
And that takes the reconnection to nature.
Yeah, and it strikes me so often, and I think has done for most of my life, because I'm from the UK and specifically from Wales, which some have branded as the first and final colony, but that's another story possibly. But it's heavy here, like that repression of emotions and almost mockery of a belief in spiritual things, which is paradoxical because we do have religion and we have quite a lot of people who are into crystal
magic,
tarot cards,
druids, right? Druids is kind of like one of the focal places of the druids, right?
That's where I'm living now, really near Morn, Anglesey, which was the kind of final stronghold of the druids before the Romans slaughtered them. Yeah, so I've been reconnecting a lot with that. It's interesting because more and more people I speak to around here, when I mention druidry, they all go, oh yeah, me too. So everyone, not everyone, but many people instinctively are drawn to the magical, right? The liminal, the spiritual, and yet it's like people feel they have to whisper it because it's so kind of not proper, not professional, not adult or mature, right? There's all this stigma. And I think I love Garry's story now about the line manager, because on a personal level, what I see in people around me is more and more and more people's souls waking up and going, hey, what is going on? This isn't right. And, I think what we have found ourselves in is a position where we can kind of help people and go, it's okay, I can hold space for you to process that. Because, yeah, that's scary for people, right? Because the messaging is that you're losing your mind and your grip on reality if you start to sense things beyond the socially prescribed senses.
It's ridiculous. Because actually, I think that's the process of going back into our inner child. And our inner child had such an amazing connection to creation. Matter of fact, everything that we have now was born out of the imagination of somebody.
Yeah.
And kind of went psychopathic, but still,
Yep.
it was a imagination. It didn't exist before. So why don't we just create something different?
Yeah.
Pretty simple.
Yeah. And then people's capacity for imagination has also been destroyed or severely damaged, right? I think on purpose. I mean, it's really sad to me how many people say they don't remember their dreams. They don't remember anything. And I think that's kind of, for me, that's like a sign of someone who also has a strong relationship with their imagination, like whether they have detailed dreams that they remember. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm just wondering this out loud now, if you encourage people to start writing down just a word or a feeling they have when they wake up, and then that usually helps you remember more and more and more dreams.
Yeah.
And I think what that does is, it shifts the consciousness to possibilities. It kind of makes you realize there's way more to the universe than the day to day.
Yeah. And because the hegemony is so scared of the power of imagination and intuition, so scared that people with imagination, the artists, the dreamers, the contrarians, they can actually completely shift the paradigms. They're so scared that the first people they go on a witch hunt for are the people who can dream, who can. So, I mean, the entire witch hunt, literally the witch hunt, were for women who were connected to nature, who understood nature like the back of their hand because they knew they were a part of it. But you can't have such people uh, under your command because they are not going to go and destroy nature and commodify it for a handful of money. So you have to kill them. And then you have to tell the world that nature is just a resource out there and human beings sit atop this imaginary triangle at the apex so that we can destroy everything because everything needs to be monetized. I mean, what's the good of a standing old forest, right? Old growth forest is nothing unless it's money, unless it's capital. So that cannot be done with people who have imagination, who dream, who are visionaries, who are contrarians, who are rebels. So they are threats to hegemony. So all these qualities that actually we all have and were born with have been deliberately through generations decimated. So when we talk about someone with this incredible power of telepathy, we all actually have it, except that we haven't practiced it. We are out of touch with it. So it feels like magic when we see it in someone who has cultivated it and nourished it and nurtured it. And so today, I think what is happening is literally the overpowering qualities that made hegemony what it is, logic and rationalizing and whatever, have become so disbalanced in that they have taken over to such an extent. Now, what seems logical to the hegemony is actually utterly insane to any normal human.
It is.
So,
It's
I,
psychopathy.
yeah.
As
So
I
unless that
keep
is
saying.
exactly, it's crazy. I mean, unless
Mhm.
that is leavened, unless that is balanced with imagination, intuition, compassion, empathy, all the all the true emotions and feelings and senses that actually make us complete, we are lopsided as a civilization. And so lopsided that now it's like, you can't fly a lopsided plane, it's going to crash. That's precisely where we are. We are crashing.
Yes, I love that metaphor. That's perfect.
Nose first, straight into the God knows where.
Straight into the volcano.
Yep.
We're the sacrifice.
Yep.
Everybody's a sacrifice, and we don't need to sacrifice anybody.
So we need the druids and the witches back. We need the crones.
Yeah.
You actually reminded me of Haggitude. Have any of you read the book?
Which one?
Sharon Blackie. No, Sharon. I keep forgetting. My memory.
What's the name of the book?
Haggitude. And
No.
if women rose rooted. I
No,
love
never
those
heard of it.
books.
No, I haven't. Please put that in the chat. I think people would be
I will.
interested. I know I am. That's that. See, me and Gwen had a private conversation about this not too long ago, and about magic and how when I was younger, I was always called a witch, or in Italy, my one of my boyfriends called me streghetta. And I laughed and I said, "Why you call me streghetta? Because every time you're mad at me, something bad happens." Oh, I said, "I'm a good witch. I don't do that kind of magic. No, that's you. That's your energy. That's your karma. That's your mind. That's not me. But if I'm reminding you, oh well, you know." So I think that's what we need. Did you know that the word gossip used to not mean what it means now? Anybody know what the word gossip originally meant? Well, the gossip was like godparent or godmother. Okay. And so someone who would speak kind words or guide the community. It was usually amongst women. They'd get together and they would gossip and tell each other, meet in community and discuss what was happening and what needed to change and things like that. But when patriarchy really came up and started dominating, they literally outlawed gossiping. And there was a picture very similar to the slaves being gagged with the mouthpiece, that these women would have to wear this. And it also was the beginning of the witch trials, because there's a power in words. It's part of magic. It's how you cast a spell. That's how you make somebody feel loved. It makes you feel, or give somebody pain. you know Words resonate at the back of your throat, and it doesn't come out as a wave as a lot of people think. It's actually a circle spiraling outside into the rest of the universe. So our words do have impact. Oh, I can't hear you, Gwen. We can't hear you. Oh, we can't hear you. What happened? uh. Garry, chime in, man. Gwen's figuring this out.
I don't want to pollute the space, Trina. it's beautiful. No, it's sort of bringing it back to the nature climate lens.
Yes.
I find it really fascinating that there is so I come, as you know, from a business corporatization lens, right? And it's really interesting that the focus on sustainability is more about the business as usual lens, certification, continue what we're doing just with a better badge, with some carbon credits and an improved way of misdirecting everyone. And I see post-hegemony being about accountability and about dialogue and about listening. So trying to bring those three horizons together and go, like, look, what would happen, Trina, Gwyneth and Sahana, if we could actually connect and use technology for good by connecting the 99% of people that want to make this world and planet thrivable and connected, right? There's 99% of people that actually do want to be in this conversation. different levels of frequency, different levels of awareness. But there's 99% of 8 billion people that would like to be here, feeling held, feeling loved, imagining, creative, wondering, right? It's only 1% that don't want to be in this conversation. And I think trying to remember that within corporate spaces and outside is so important, because it can feel so lonely, right? Like it can feel so lonely being that sort of lone voice in your context. And that's why I'm so grateful to each of you and all of us finding one another, because this should be the norm. At the end of these three, right? This should be a normal conversation, inverted commas. Yet it's still very much on the periphery. So that's what's coming up for me at the moment, is just that, how do we stay critical? How do we stay accountable? And again, I thank you publicly, Gwyneth, for holding me to account a few weeks ago. We need to be able to do that in community. We need to be able to say, I've spotted this, and I'm coming to you with care to say, hey, that wasn't right. And us having the humility and vulnerability to go, that's coming from a place of love and bigger picture, and isn't about my ego. And I think that's a big shift in the whole climate environmental discussion, is how can we come from that individual and collective lens, but be accountable in all directions. These are the sorts of things that are coming up for me.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now, by the way?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
We got you. We got you.
Okay, just had to leave and come back. Yeah, thank you. I was going to just say that I'd heard about that gossip, right, fact recently, and it was the BBC Sounds Witch podcast, which is really a nice 30-part series investigating what is the witch, and she really goes into the witch trials. And I just love that you brought that up today, because I was thinking about that as I was preparing to come on here today. I was just thinking, like, I'm just like, what is wrong with white people? And
you, Garry, when you talk amongst yourself, Sahana and I know what's wrong, but
right. And it came like a meme I saw a few weeks ago, which is like, yeah, we like killed most of our wise women. So there you go. You have a society made up of people who are not being raised properly by people who are, connected to nature and aware of our interconnectedness and all of that stuff. And I mean, I really feel like the spirit of the witch is reawakening really strongly at the moment.
I know. And
they were
and
our
when
leaders.
and when you spoke about dreaming, that is so important. Have any of y'all read Tokopa Turner's Belonging?
It's a really beautiful book.
Yeah, and so it's when we when we actually visualize our dreams are giving us a message. Now the point is, the entire current civilization, hegemonic one, has been created so devoid of anything that is actually nourishing and nurturing. It's literally, what we say, the matrix. It's like you've created a civilization sitting at a keyboard with an Excel sheet in front of you. There is nothing that captures the abundance and entanglement and our enmeshed web of life. It's just this false construct, sort of thumped down on all living sentient beings. And so what has happened is, the messages that we inherently get, we've learned to ignore. Our dreams, our intuition, our imagination, our creativity, our visions, and everything that really matters, we've learned to ignore. And when we bring them up, you're like, oh, she's weird, she's one of the weird ones. But
Heard that my whole life.
it is, same here, same here. But it is perfectly fine to put everything on a PPT and an Excel sheet and say, hey, okay, so this looks like a possible plan, and this is what we'll do. Now, what makes that more possible and this impossible has always been beyond me, and my skepticism literally, let me walk out of my corporate world. But the point is, when you try to pin down our entire entangled web of life onto a PPT and a marketing plan and a business case for sustainability, well, you've just killed yourself.
Mhm.
And they don't even realize in their sorry Gary, but they don't even realize in their gray and blue suits how weird and disembodied they look and sound. I'm sorry, but I've always felt this entire boardroom of huge mahogany or teak wood tables surrounded by these black, gray, navy blue suits that are supposedly professional and look so colorless and lifeless. And oh my God, I mean, the rooms look dead. I've
Have you
always wanted to sprinkle those rooms with colors and post-its and plans and, you know, give them some colors. Think, be creative. Y'all are like dead souls in a zombie body, for heaven's sake.
wanted to ask,
Okay.
have you heard of chromophobia? It's
Yes.
like there's this
Mhm.
whole theory, right?
I
That
know.
it's distaste for bright colors. It's all linked to colonialism. And
Oh,
yeah, my
wow.
partner is
So
Indian
they
as
must have
well.
gone mad when they came to India and went to Africa. It's bright
Yeah,
colors everywhere.
yeah, my partner is from India and he's always just like, why is everything so grey here?
I
Where's the color?
know.
Yeah,
Gary, what
so
were you
we
about to say? What were you about
Sorry.
to say, Gary?
Just yes, Gwyneth. just yeah. But Trina, no joke, no joke. The military. This is where, like, okay, we're staying with current hegemony and not so much past. If we look at post hegemony, it will mean we go round offices which are more in line with nature or integrated, and people are actually wearing their own clothes, which might actually be ancestral, which might actually be colourful. Do you know what? Do you know, like, it's really true, right? Like, literally, I'm surrounded by people that still wear the closest thing to pinstripe suits and ties to fit in with the colonial model of,
Yeah.
that's, sorry, last thing. Literally, companies in the chemical industry have still got bloody dress codes in the part of their employee manuals. Like this is not a joke. Like, so this is back to those three lenses that Gwyneth opened with and the three horizons, right? Is to honor that. We can have a laugh about it, but no, it's still actually there. And how do we actually speak to that and these other lenses? Joke about them, yes, but honor them as well, because ultimately we've got to pull people through these seeming paradoxes at the same time, right?
Yeah.
So at any point, if we go down on, say, actually that one, yeah, that shouldn't be there, but it needs to be honored, right? Otherwise, we're not going to heal and pull through. So somehow there is this paradox, which most in the corporate world, and I mean most, they can feel, Trina and Sahana and Gwyneth, they feel something's wrong, but they can't voice it. They don't know how to talk about it. They don't feel safe to talk about it.
That's
And I
right.
think that's where nature has a real opportunity. Like, as per my line manager, if we can get more people out into it, more people into this dialogue, I think it's got a really quite exponential impact, potentially.
And that makes me think of something, you know, Gwen, you've led a lot of these kind of retreats and mentorship around within nature for healing and reconnection, right? What does beyond hegemony look like for you for the earth and for humans on the earth and how do we reintegrate in to
Yeah,
change this?
that's the question, isn't it? I mean, I was thinking about this earlier, and I was firstly thinking like the first step is to get everyone to dream and feel into that question, right? Because I'm
Mhm.
only going to have a tiny piece of the jigsaw in my answer, and it's not going to come with the roadmap of how we actually get there. And I feel like online, in a lot of spaces, there's almost like a pressure, isn't there, that, oh, if you're going to go against the hegemony and dream of something better, you better have a flawless plan for how we're going to do it. And I'm like, I'm just just one human. However, yeah, I mean, the vision or the dream is, we recognize our interconnectedness with nature, like that's taught from a young age, and that we understand reasonable limits. And I just think if we, if it was a core part of our society that everyone is raised to have emotional intelligence, self-awareness, maturity, all of those things, that we just wouldn't feel the need to take more than our share anyway, because that would just be illogical and weird, right? And like, why would you need to hoard all the resources to yourself? And I imagine that a lot of indigenous societies heavily discouraged that kind of behavior because it was antisocial. And so if you were trying to hoard resources, you'd probably, you might get kicked out of the tribe. And I think we need to make that behavior again almost like the ultimate crime, like hoarding things. So yeah, maybe not the 100% non-violent path, but I feel like, why is that okay or rewarded to behave in that massively antisocial way?
Yes.
And yeah, I think, in many ways we just need to look at societies that already live in line with nature, and maybe there's room for improvement too, right? Because I think one criticism is, oh, you can't just romanticize certain societies. Like, okay, we are capable of complex thinking. We can take some bits from modern society that are actually nice, like, I don't know, access to good healthcare when needed, not just when for profit. And, we can take things that we have learned as well, right, as ancient ways of being that have worked for, well, what humans in the current form have been around 200,000 years, and other forms of humanoid for far longer. And yet this society we live in, this hegemony, is the blink of an eye compared to that, right? That's another part of the work that reconnects, is envisioning human history as the 24-hour clock, and saying, hey, we've only been here like this, using electricity, using technology, since 1 minute to midnight or something.
Right.
Yep.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of looking back as well and dreaming into it. And yeah, I just think it would be so powerful for every community to just come together and be like, okay, for 3 hours, we have more than 3 hours, but we have permission to just dream of what we would love and not have to think about, is it practical? Is it possible?
Exactly.
And then we can
Exactly.
think about that.
Exactly. I encourage all my clients to do that. When I tell them, let's create your vision, create your, what does that look like? I notice we still, some of them imagine in the confines of their current situation every single time. And I say, why so small? If you could have anything any way you want, why not go bigger? Go bigger. I'm like constantly encouraging them to go bigger with their imagination, go bigger with their vision. Because if we don't, we kind of just stay within this bubble that's already been created for us. So let's break outside of that bubble. And why not? Why can't we have floating cities, right? Why can't we create that? We can create all kinds of stuff, and I think correction of history is a huge part too. That's my opinion, because as we know, hegemony has had a concerted effort to lie, distort, and change history to fit their narrative of supremacy. So we've got a lot of revealing of true history, which I think there's a panic mode happening with hegemony, and that a lot of the destruction of these ancient sites and everything else has a lot to do with that. Has a lot to do with that. It's no surprise that they go in Iraq and Iran, and they totally steal all of the ancient artifacts. It's no coincidence that the Vatican holds a treasure trove of artifacts and information and scrolls that somehow the rest of the public has no access to. And I wonder why. So
well, if we're dreaming really big, Trina, I'll also have a time machine so we can go and kind of see what was really going on in history.
yeah. Supposedly they have one of those in the Vatican too.
Oh, okay. Well, we're in trouble there. They can just go change the timeline.
I think that's what they've been doing. Somebody broke it though, so now everybody's like, "Ha ha! Let's get this started." So we're getting close to the top of the hour here, and I know everybody's got lots of things to do. Should we enter final thoughts and on beyond hegemony for our climate and for environment? Anybody jump in? I'm not first. Go for it, Garry.
I'll go for it first. I just want to say thank Gwyneth. You've just given me a beautiful reframe of antisocial behaviour. So I do a lot of community work with Neighbourhood Watch, the national charity in the UK, about building community and crime prevention, etc. So my invitation to myself and everyone listening or watching back is, what are the words that you use that come out of your mouth that often go unchecked? So like antisocial behaviour for me has a particular narrative, but I've never thought about it from a point of view of taking more than our share. So what would it look like to reimagine some of our language from a nature community-centric lens? So antisocial behaviour at the moment in the UK is crime prevention and antisocial behaviour. But what if post-hegemony or beyond hegemony, antisocial behaviour is, as Gwyneth said, not taking more than your share? So I'm just leaving that as one little seed of actually what is the language that we use, and how maybe how could the same words be used in a post-hegemonic world to mean more inclusivity, more connectedness, more health, more thriving. That's what I'm taking away. So thank you all. And I'm going to pass the baton on to dear Sahana. Thank you. If I'm allowed.
So I've been, this has been a really, really inspiring conversation, Gwyneth and Trina, Garry. And what I'm taking away, one is to dream, to imagine. And the other, like you said, Garry, is how do we reframe the words that describe our world? So when we, I mean, just because just let's look at an organization. Look at the language that is used. We treat the organization like a military machine. I mean, it's strategizing and it is a race for something. It is competition. It's constantly the language that is used is the words of that that talk about aggression, that competition, that might is right, that the winner takes all, and all those phrases. When you look at those phrases, the phrases have become loaded with a kind of power syndrome that is actually driving the hegemony, that is toxic. But when we use different words, or we use words very consciously, choose our words, and refuse to get pulled into using these phrases, refuse to see an organization in a competitive rush, or a leader as, oh, he's the winner, and kind of, you stop using those words and consciously use words of stewardship and facilitation and care and compassion, because the language is infinite.
Right.
And if the word is not there, let's make it up. Let's create words.
Right.
I mean, like Paul Tillich said, I think it's Paul Tillich. I'm horrible at remembering names, but I think it's Paul Tillich, who said that alone talks about the grief of, being lonely. So when you're alone, you are feeling the grief of being without anyone. And solitude talks about the joy of being alone. So we have a vast vocabulary and we can make up more words, I'm sure, if required. But we don't have to fall into the trap of the words that have created the hegemonic world. Like Gary said, and that's so true, that when we use certain words, if just sit with it for 30 seconds and think of all the aggressive words that you can think of, and you'll start feeling your body, sensing your body very differently.
Mm.
Whereas if you sit for 30 seconds with words like calm and peace and connection, and visualize forests and waterfall and rainfall and the sound of water and the sounds of streams, you'll feel different.
That's beautiful.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's my invitation.
I love that invitation. I went there for a minute too. Mm. And Gwen?
Yeah. Well, what's kind of coming up for me now, just with this conversation about the words we use, is, literally the question of language, right? Because we're kind of talking about words in English, one of the many languages of the colonizer, in a way. And I'm blessed that I grew up bilingual, so speaking Welsh as well, which is a much more ancient European Celtic language, and it has been heavily influenced by English and by Latin and a lot over the years. But even with those two languages, I find huge differences where you word things in a very different way. So in Welsh, we don't say I have something, we say something is with me. So just that framing of like ownership being much more active in English. And for people who have grown up monolingual, I think it's really hard to understand that. But for people who've grown up with more than one language, everyone I've spoken to has resonated with this idea that you kind of have almost a different personality when you speak a different language. Different thoughts become possible. And that's why I kind of urge anyone who only speaks one language to really just go learn a bit of another language, especially not a colonizing language, because I've learned a bit of French, Portuguese. They're still from colonizing countries. And do you know Robin Wall Kimmerer, who wrote Braiding Sweetgrass? She's like a First Nations person, and she writes that when she tried learning her own kind of indigenous language, at first it was really frustrating because there were so many verbs, and she's like, what does it mean to be a river, to be a tree? How is that a verb? But then as time went by, she kind of realized, oh, English is full of nouns, objects, right? Whereas her language is full of flow states of being. And also she brings attention to the pronoun it to describe things in nature, and says we need a new pronoun for nature. And I just thought, oh yeah, well, in Welsh we don't have a word it. Everything is he or she. So the trees or the sky or the world, it's all a he or she pronoun. Although I don't know which one often, because that's like stuff my grandma knew, and the language has been watered down. And we used to have 100% Welsh fluency in Wales, and now it's kind of 20%. So I think that's a side of myself I've kind of ignored for many years, because I moved away and tried to fit in with the global hegemony, and even my accent sounds far more English than most people's around here. So for me, like, what's coming up is what brought me home last year anyway. It's like deeper connection with the Welshness and the roots and the Druids and the land. And and I would also say this talk about witches has been really nice. And if people are just easing into it, the BBC Sounds podcast, which is really nice as a kind of beginner thing. But if you're a bit deeper, Barbara Ehrenreich has this book, Witches, Midwives, and Healers or something, and it links the birth of capitalism with the murder of healers and witches. And it's a short book, but it's so powerful. So yeah, just want to.
Wonderful. Well, I will. My just short thoughts is that what you just said about the occult. Let me tell you, hegemony is steeped in it, and it's probably one of the first frontiers that they chose to dominate. Whether it's Freemasons and all these other secret societies, this was a big part. And you know, the whole war, World War II, there was a undercurrent of occultism led by the Nazis. So don't get it twisted. It's a huge part of it, and I think the efforts of the hegemony to lessen that, to ridicule that, to make other people seem like they're crazy, has been happening since the beginning of the imperialistic drive, or what somebody said that it was uh, there was no civilization. There was a death cult that took over the world, and that's what has happened. Everything has died in its wake, and so my ending thoughts is that let's ponder our words as we speak them, like everybody's saying. I love how we came on to this, the power of speech, the power of language, how language actually, English is probably the lesser language. I speak four. And so I'm right now digging back into Latin a little bit and a little bit of Arabic. And I the deepest parts of me wants to understand Sumerian too. So that's why I started looking into doing Arabic on my Duolingo. So there is an interconnectedness of all of these things. And I want to thank Gwyneth for jumping on here today and sharing herself and sharing her spirit. And of course, co-host Garry and Sahana. Shahana, we missed you, girl. We missed you. Thanks for coming back and blessing us. And I'd like to thank everybody who's been listening and watching these lives on the playback. I know the time might be weird for those folks in the US, but thank you. And you guys all have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.